This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock. Glad to have you with us. I'm joined by Susan Inman. She is the Democratic nominee for Arkansas Secretary of State and an old friend of mine. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Roby.
We have worked together at one point
We
in time.
have. We have.
So I know you know a thing or two about elections. It's good to know. Tell everybody who doesn't know, though, you do have some previous elections experience. What qualifies you for the state's chief elections officer?
Well, my whole career has been in election administration, as you know, because we started working together back in the early or mid-90s, I think.
Yeah, don't age me that much,
fine.
Susan. Is it?
Well, it ages me too. But I have served as a county election commissioner and a state election commissioner. I actually worked in the Secretary of State's office under a previous administration as the director of elections. So my whole career has been working to ensure that people get to vote and participate. I've even been called on by the U.S. Department of State to observe and monitor elections in foreign countries. So that's my thing, is what I do, is my passion to make sure everybody's vote counts.
Well, I want to talk about that overseas monitoring thing there, because I know some other people have gotten to do that before too. What do you do when you go monitor overseas? I mean, are you just standing in a voting polling place, or are you doing something more than that? I'm not sure what all that entails.
Well, it's an observation mission, and it's a two-member team. You're given a list of polling locations in a geographic area, and you identify how to get there. You have a driver and an interpreter, and then you sit and observe the process of opening the polls, visit different polls during the day, and then you watch one close. Watch the ballots being counted, how they're secured, and how they're transported to the end location. So it's really an assessment. So we have a checklist that we, will assess the process and how people are doing their job, and whether it's open and fair, if there were any irregularities. So the final picture is the multiple assessments from other observers that will say it's a good election or a bad election.
Where's the craziest place that you've ever been where you just, you got to have a good story or two in there where, there's some 007 kind of stuff or something going on?
Well, I've been to Russia. I've seen their elections, but the craziest...
What was that experience like?
Well, it was really fairly pleasant, actually, yes. But one of the craziest places was in Belarus, where somebody knew where we were at each step of the way. So either our driver was texting ahead saying the observers are coming, clean it up. That happened all day long. So that was kind of a different, unusual situation. They were peering at the windows when we were driving up.
Interesting. So, well, we'll have to read your report on that one.
Okay.
You find that online. What about, what's maybe one of the more exotic places that you've gotten to go? Did you ever get to go monitor the Virgin Islands elections or something?
No, sorry. This is not part of the observation trip, but probably one of the most interesting countries was Kyrgyzstan, because it sits there on the Silk Road, and the culture there was ever present in the country till today, and it was a very interesting experience.
So you've seen a lot of these foreign countries and their elections. You've obviously seen a lot of what happens here in Arkansas. I mean, when you see reports about the Russians interfered in our elections in 2016, and you read some of the detail that is out there on that, I would presume you believe it, number one. And number two, what do you think Arkansas's election security is in the context of all that?
I believe it. I believe there were certainly, Facebook and social media efforts to persuade people to vote a certain way. And obviously the attempt to hack into some of the systems is real. They were stopped. That effort to hack was focused on the voter registration systems, not the voting part of it. I'm hopeful that there are things in place in Arkansas to prevent that from happening. I feel comfortable that the voter registration system is secure, because there's going to be a backup in every locale. That's my take on that at this time.
Yeah, and that's really the best you could hope for, is to have the backup there and be able to retrace something if there is some sort of discrepancy. We've had some discrepancies in Arkansas elections before, but I think it was many, many decades ago before you and I were involved in stuff. You've talked about voting by mail as something that you have pushed for. There are some western states that I think are doing this already. Why is that idea a good one for Arkansas?
Well, we already vote by mail in Arkansas anyway. We call it absentee
right.
voting. And that option should certainly be expanded to move us toward a more vote by mail state. But the vote by mail, it reaches people that are not reached, that would participate, but they can't get to the polling place. They can't get to the early voting location. And we're seeing in Arkansas right now the reduction of polling locations all over the state. They're moving to vote centers, which is a great thing. But when you take a county that had 20, 30 polling locations and you reduce it down to 8 or 9, you've cut down the means for someone in a more rural area to get to the polls. I mean, you can say, oh, it's, anybody could vote wherever they are. That's fine, but there are people out there that can't get there. So the vote by mail option is the solution to reach other people.
Some people forget historically the reason we have such a healthy primary voting system right now is Governor Asa Hutchinson, when he was the head of the Republican Party of Arkansas back in the early 90s, actually filed a federal lawsuit because parties used to pay for the primaries.
That's correct.
And the state took that over as a result of that lawsuit that he was successful in, and that's why we have polling places. It used to be maybe one polling place for Republicans in an entire county at the time, and multiple Democratic ones. So you remember those days?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And that was a wonderful thing when the cost of conducting the primaries was given to the state, and it just afforded more people the opportunities to participate.
Yeah. What about, where do you stand on voter ID? There will be a constitutional measure. It doesn't have a challenge right now in terms of the constitutional measure there. It looks overwhelmingly popular when you look at our polling data on that. Where do you stand on that issue?
I stand to let the people make that decision. Personally, if you're asking me personally, I say we don't need it, but this is the will of the people, and that's certainly something across the country that people do want.
What could you do as Secretary of State if it passes like it would be indicative that it might do? Are there things that you could do to make sure that that ID requirement is more accessible for more folks?
Certainly, and I think that's the perfect venue to make the information out to the citizens about what they need when they go to the polls. And if there are people that need the ID, get that information out to those that may not be able to participate. And even with the vote by mail, you're going to have to send back a copy of your ID.
Yeah. You worried about fraud in vote by mail? That's been one of the objections that's been raised to it. But I mean, like you said, we have it already. But I mean, is there a potential for more voter fraud if there is a vote by mail system that's more robust?
No. And I say that because Arkansas has done a really good job in tightening up the absentee balloting processes. Like, for instance, a designated bearer in olden days could pick up multiple ballots.
It never happens. It never happens.
Well, long ago.
Oh, I've seen it, yeah.
But now the law says there's a designated bearer can only ever have in its possession 2 ballots.
Yeah.
And that's recorded. That bearer's name is written down at the courthouse if they take a ballot out, and they're the only ones that can bring it back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's so many tight procedures in the absentee voting that's not an issue. I mean, you can imagine it being an issue, but it's simply not.
All right, you gotta be careful how you answer this next question, because if you're elected, you might have to do some work on this. Redistricting, that will happen in 2020, or as a result of the 2020 census, so it'll happen a little bit after that. I guess the 2021 legislative sessions where that would happen. There is a proposal out there, at least they've gotten approval from the Attorney General's office to collect their ballot signatures to basically create an independent commission that would redraw district lines. Right now, it's the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Governor, whomever they may be. Would you support a move to an independent commission?
Absolutely.
Why?
I think that would put it in the hands of people that are not partisan, that can make a better informed decision. It makes a larger body that would bring in more people to discuss the drawing of the boundaries rather than in the hands of 3 partisan officials.
Well, it's worked all these years, Susan, come on.
Well, the term gerrymandering come to your attention?
I have a lot of gerrymandered congressional districts per se.
Well,
in Arkansas,
that
but
body doesn't do the
legislative-
congressionals.
Right. Well, that's true. The legislature does. But this commission proposal, though, would take that away from the legislature as well. So.
I support it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. She's Susan Inman. She's the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State. Good to visit with you.
Thank you so
I
much.
never get to kind of really talk about elections like this. You know, this is for the political
fun.
nerd in me. I
I
get to do
know.
this on a regular basis. So.
Thank you, Roby.
All right, thank you. That's all for today's program. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We will see you next time.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.